Welcome to today's webinar on ASD and travel. Before I introduce today's presenter, I would want to make a couple of announcements. We know many of you are listening in from far away and aren't able to attend local events or programs. That's why we provide this free webinar series. We host several webinars per month, so please visit our website to view the current schedule. Simply visit our website at www.johnson-center.org and click on the webinars link on the right-hand side. The 2018 webinar schedule was recently posted, so be sure to check it out. And if you are not on our email list, I encourage you to visit our website and click on the Join Our Email List link that appears on the homepage. To get up-to-date news and events from the Johnson Center, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, as we often announce grant and scholarship opportunities, research opportunities, and special events and presentations there. And be sure to check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Johnson Center. Please note that while we don't send out copies of the slides of the presentations, past webinars are posted to the YouTube channel and accessible for free. You will find a library of wide variety of topics, and links for certificates of attendance are in the webinar description. Also be sure to follow our colleagues at the Autism Research Institute, as they host their own webinar initiative and they share some great resources on their website and social media pages. If you would like a certificate of attendance after today's webinar, look for a follow-up email in your mailbox 1 hour after the webinar concludes, or look for the link on our YouTube channel in the webinar description. It will contain instructions on how to get your certificate. If you have questions during the live webinar, you may type them into your GoToWebinar control panel. If you are watching a recording of this webinar, you may email questions to the presenter at info@johnson-center.org. Today's webinar is presented by Wendy Richardson. Wendy has spent more than a decade working in the autism community. Here at the Johnson Center, she has been involved as a family support coordinator, a research coordinator, and much more. Her efforts are always focused on providing information, education, and empowerment for people with autism and their families. Please welcome Wendy Richardson.
Thank you, and welcome to ASD and Travel, Tips, Tricks, and Considerations. Travel can be tricky. When you're planning to go on a family vacation, it can be exciting and equally as stressful. Planning a trip with accommodations for a child or adult with special needs can increase a parent or caregiver's stress. We wanted to tackle this subject because we've consistently heard that travel and visiting relatives is important to our parents, and they often find it missing. When travel is challenging, it reduces the opportunities for families that live far from each other to share holidays and other important celebrations. I hope that this webinar offers helpful information that will make your travel plans more enjoyable and less stressful. I am going to offer some helpful tips on the planning and execution of your travels, as well as offer some recommended resources, websites, and articles to help make your travels a little bit easier. There's so much information to share. This presentation is about basic travel with an airline focus. Later in the year, I'll do a webinar with a focus on cruises and other types of travel. So what are our travel fears? Most people say it's their own fear of travel or their nervousness regarding the experience for their child, and their anxiousness that their child will be the one having the epic meltdown mid-flight. So the preparation, being prepared is key, and you can't start prepping for your trip too early. One way to prepare is to start a countdown. It can relieve stress and anxiety for your child about when the trip is going to happen. And it also adds to the excitement of your travel starting. There are a million free downloadable countdown calendar printables on the web. So they're easy to find, and tack it up on the fridge and get everyone counting. Another way to prepare is to talk about the trip in advance, and especially the flight if you're traveling by air, so your child knows what to expect. You can make a visual schedule about the entire travel day for your child. Don't forget to build in breakfast, lunch, and bathroom breaks. It's also fun to use a cell phone timer or even cheap wristwatch, and some can cost as little as $10, and it can be a great travel gift. and it will let your child keep track of stops and keep time for each step of the trip. A visual timetable. There are so many on the web and tons of free edit your own apps. One trip down Pinterest lane and I found too many choices. There are a few apps that make it easy to create a visual schedule. Ones like this visual schedule planner is about $15. So I've never used the one shown, but there are a variety of this type. Another way to make a visual schedule on your own, I take photos of each item my child should pack, and I create a schedule that they can match the items to. And if you don't have a color printer to do this, there's millions of clip art images that you can print in black and white to accomplish the same thing. A really fun way to prepare for airplane travel is to create a social story and then act out what happens on the plane. You can make it super fun and playful and set up chairs in your living room so it looks like the aisles of a plane, and pretend you're the flight attendant and ask your child questions the flight attendants will ask. Have your child practice how to respond to the flight attendant or the person sitting next to them. Some scenarios you might create a social story for are walking through security, boarding the plane and exiting the plane, using the tiny bathroom on the plane, dealing with turbulence, how to do takeoff and landing, and anticipating air pressure. There's a social story creator app on the iTunes store. There's also a variety of those as well. Let's talk about packing tips. Another way to prepare is to involve your child in packing for the trip. We talked about a visual schedule, and you can do a packing schedule with photos of what you want your child to bring, or you can use generic pictures from the web. It's great to start a week before traveling. It gives you time to forget the items that you forgot. So you and your child can do this fun project together. Choose a place in your home where you can lay out clothes and see everything that you put out. One thing to remember is checking the weather report. That might alter what you're packing. And then 2 days before traveling, actually packing your suitcase. Have your child help you, and that will assure them that you're bringing what they need, and they may be less anxious about it. They actually help you do it. I liked the great suggestion on autisticglobetrotting.com where they suggested getting 2.5-gallon Ziploc bags and colored tape, especially if you're packing various family members' items in the same suitcase. You can give each family member a different color of tape on their Ziploc, and that makes it easy for everyone to quickly identify their own items. Also, I put socks, pajamas, and underwear separately and on top of the suitcase. And it's good to do if you know getting in jammies is going to be critical for you or your child. And I always pack a couple of extra empty Ziploc bags in case the ones that I use rip or don't close well, or use them for dirty clothes. A similar strategy can be used with packing toiletries, and you can let your child assist you with this also. Together, you can make a chart of the start of the day to the end of the day and the toiletries that are needed. When preparing for travel, think about your child's sensitivities. Does he or she have trouble with loud noises? If so, remember noise-canceling headphones or earplugs. If this is something your child does not usually wear, start practicing weeks ahead at home. Anything new that you're going to implement on the trip should be introduced weeks before. Practice, practice, practice is key. Even practice wearing sunglasses before you land in bright, sunny Hawaii if you want your child to protect their eyes and they may not be used to wearing sunglasses, another thing to practice. So the magic suitcase of in-flight reinforcers. So you want to get on the plane with plenty of reinforcers. First, think of your child's daily routine and bring along the necessities that help him or her through the day. Snacks, toys, books, electronics, or assistive communication tools. Show your child what you're packing, just in case he or she feels any angst about you forgetting a favorite item. Add to your magic suitcase of distractions some new items. One thing my kids like is if I wrap old and new toys in colorful wrapping paper so they can be opened at various times during the flight. Be sure to ration them so everything isn't opened before you take off. Add batteries or chargers to your do not forget list. It's easy to forget, batteries. So I added to all of my lists. Another must-have list, ID. So Autism Speaks has on their website that adult passengers aged 18 and over are required to show a U.S. federal or state issued ID that contains the following: name, date of birth, gender, expiration date, as well as a tamper-resistant feature in order to be allowed through the checkpoint on all flights. Those IDs can be a driver's license, a state ID card, a U.S. passport, a permanent resident card. But I double-checked on the TSA.gov website, which is the Transportation Security Administration page of the government website, and it said ID requirements at the checkpoint will change beginning January 22nd, 2018. So note that there may be upcoming changes, and everyone should check tsa.gov before traveling. Let's talk about medical and safety concerns. It can be useful to call your child's doctor for medical recommendations while traveling. You can also get a one-page medical history and physician's letter stating your child's disability. And in an emergency or to verify certain accommodations, this letter can be helpful. Have all medications and the phone number for your pharmacy with you. Most national pharmacy chains can transfer a medication prescription to another store, but if you're not sure, you can ask your child's doctor for copies of prescriptions in case you need to refill them while you are on your trip. And just a reminder about all the documents. You want to have a don't forget list for documents. So you always want to make sure they're easy to get in your purse, on your carry-on. You can always have a backup PDF copy of everything on your laptop. I always email these documents to myself so that I can find them easily. So make a checklist and really go over it before you leave. There's nothing worse than getting to the airport and realizing one child's passport is on the dining room table at home. So think about boarding passes, tickets, reservations, passports, green cards, birth certificates, driver's license. You may need custody papers notarizing consent from another parent, depending on the custody status. That's something that you want to think about way ahead of time. Bring credit card phone numbers, people that you would need to contact in case of loss of your credit cards. Car insurance. Are you renting a car in a foreign land? Is that something that you need? Copies of travel insurance that you've purchased. Membership cards for associations like AAA if you've booked hotels with discounts. Or discount cards like Costco memberships. They may get you discounts on hotels or theme parks. And then again, medical cards, copies of medical cards, copies of prescriptions, that medical history you could just have downloaded on a memory chip, and the doctor's note describing diagnosis and allergies. Those are must-haves. So this is a TSA card, and some find this TA card helpful during security screenings. The card can be presented to a TSA officer in case you need additional assistance. It just says it's for individuals with disabilities and medical conditions. And it says, I have the following health condition, disability, or medical device that may affect my screening. And then you write in your specific item. I understand that alternate procedures providing an equivalent level of security screening are available and can be done in private. I also understand that presenting this card does not exempt me from screening. And on the back, it has the information that you need. And they say that travelers requiring special accommodations or concerned about security screening process at the airport may ask a TSA officer or supervisor for a passenger support specialist who can provide on-the-spot assistance. It says to alert them 72 hours in advance. We'll talk more later about security screening laws and what that entails. But this is a great card. I downloaded this from the TSA DHS Gov website. It's easy to find if you Google it. Another helpful item might be an information card. So if an adult with autism travels alone, in addition to their ID, they can consider carrying an informational card. They can show this to a TSA employee or other airport personnel if they're having trouble finding their gate or getting anxious about another situation. The card could read something like, I am a young woman with autism spectrum disorder. As you speak to me, please speak slowly and calmly so I can understand you. I'm not being rude. If I don't look you directly in the eyes or the face, I am still listening to you. It may be helpful to show me in addition to just telling me. If you have questions or concerns, please call my emergency contact. So then it can have a name, their relationship, and the phone to contact. Just again, helpful information to bring with you. Again, we talk later about help that's provided at the airport, but this card is also something to carry. Another safety measure at the airport could be an ID tag or card. These attach to a shoelace. Temporary tattoos for special needs work the same way. And these kind of alert me bands or tattoos can communicate if your child is gluten and casein free or allergic to peanuts, or it can have your cell number. So this is just an added safety measure, and there are many online. I like the safety tattoos. I order the temporary tattoos for my cell phone number in case one of mine gets lost. You could put them on a person's forearm. I always do for concerts, festivals, the zoo, any large gatherings, and at the airport, of course. So something like this tattoo requires no water. It just is a peel and stick skin applique. They can last up to 2 weeks until you're ready to remove them. And again, there's many choices of these online as well. Another thing to think about is always carry a current photo of your child. And you may have a million photos of your children on your phone, but make sure you have a recognizable current photo in case you're at the airport and you get separated and need some help. Let's start talking about security and security tips. I found some stories that I loved on walkingontravels.com, and I thought I'd share. Michelle at Malaysian Meander said, make sure that your child has not packed liquids in their backpacks unbeknownst to you. My boy once tried to sneak a bottle of ketchup through security. So just making sure that your kiddos don't add after you've completed your packing. Another parent had a great tip about make sure your kids know where to wait after clearing security. My carry-on needed extra inspection, and after I got my shoes on, I realized that my kids had already left the screening area without me. So you want to make that plan ahead of time. If somebody's stuck getting more security screening, everyone waits and where the waiting area is so that you all meet up safely. This also was a great important tip from Steve at More Kids Than Suitcases. He said, when you're traveling with all your kids' electronics in one bag, iPads and Kindles, they don't have to come out of the bag when going through security in the US, but they can't be stacked on top of each other. Apparently, the machine can only see through one or two of them, and after that, you'll get pulled aside to have your bag inspected. I used to keep all the electronics in one bag, but now we split them up and each child takes their own so we don't get delayed. I thought those were helpful. So a great suggestion, if there is anxiety about a first trip to an airport, is to call the airline several days before your day of travel and ask about bringing your child to the airport to walk around and go through security to a gate. Many airlines will accommodate you, and this will give you a dry run before your actual travel day. This will also give your loved one an opportunity to explore the airport so it becomes familiar. There are several airports and airlines that sponsor programs that do this. Wings for Autism, Wings for All are airport rehearsals specially designed for individuals with autism spectrum disorders and individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. The programs are designed to alleviate the stress that families who have a child with autism or intellectual and developmental disabilities experience when flying. It provides families the opportunity to practice entering the airport, obtaining boarding passes, going through security, and boarding a plane. Airport, airline, transportation security administration professionals, and other personnel also have the opportunity to observe, interact, and deliver their services in a structured learning environment. So I don't have the time here to play this video, but I put the name of it up. It walks you through the Wings for All program and shows you a few of the participants going through the airport and outlines what they learn. They have some parents on camera talking about the challenges of travel and the benefits of the Wings for All dress rehearsal program. I think it's really worth watching, and here's the video name so you can search for it on YouTube. It's a Wings for All from May 6, 2017. It's a great program. So let's talk about your rights. I found Melissa Stewart's Legal and Planning for Air Travelers with Disabilities, Here Are Your Rights article. Informative, but it's extensive, so I'm just going to highlight some important items, as well as important information from the brief but authoritative source of information from the Department of Transportation. So there's a great PDF on their website, just Air Travelers with Disabilities, which is a great article to read. I'm going to give you the highlights from it. So what is the Air Carrier Act? The Air Carrier Access Act prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability in air travel. The Department of Transportation has a rule defining the rights of passengers obligations of airlines under this law. The rule applies to all flights of U.S. airlines and flights to or from the United States by foreign airlines. Okay, so here's some of the main points of the Department of Transportation rules and some items from Melissa Stewart's article. So who does the Act protect? Who is entitled to protections under the Air Carrier Access Act? And they say an individual with a disability means any individual who has a physical or mental impairment on a permanent or temporary basis that substantially limits one or more major life activities, has a record of such an impairment, or is regarded as having such an impairment, individuals on the autism spectrum or other developmental disabilities are individuals with disabilities under the ACAA, Part 382, to be specific. So just because an airline offers you an accommodation, that does not mean you have to accept it. So for example, airlines must allow, but may not force a person with a disability to pre-board a plane. However, if you request an accommodation that is required by law, the airline must provide it to you free of charge. People with disabilities do not need to tell the airline ahead of time that she or he plans on flying, except under certain specific circumstances. These circumstances include traveling by stretcher, traveling with an electronic wheelchair or other device with special batteries, or requiring a hookup to the airline's oxygen system during the flight. If none of these conditions apply to you, the airline may not deny you travel for failing to tell them ahead of time. Airlines can ask about your disability to better understand your needs, so when you call the airline asking for accommodations, the airline is allowed to ask questions to better understand your needs. While the airline agents cannot ask for specific medical information related to the disability, they may ask questions to assess whether you can complete the flight safely, whether you need accommodations that the airline is required to provide, or whether reasonable modifications can be made. For example, airline personnel may not ask, "What is your disability?" but they may ask, "Can you find your way to the gate area?" or "How can I best communicate with you to provide the safety briefing?" These questions are meant to give the carrier the opportunity to better understand your needs in order to better accommodate you. Airlines may require a person with a disability to travel with an attendant, and that's someone to help the person during the flight in case of an emergency, only if the airline staff determines the person is unable to comprehend or respond appropriately to safety instructions, has a mobility impairment so severe that the person is unable to assist in his or her own evacuation from the aircraft, has both severe hearing and severe vision impairments, which prevent him or her from receiving instructions from the in-flight personnel. If the airline determines that you do need an attendant and you're traveling alone, there are other options an airline can try before denying you travel. The airline may appoint an off-duty staff member who is willing to travel on the flight, or you can ask another passenger to volunteer to assist you in case of an emergency. What should you do if you need assistance to get on and off the airplane? If you require assistance in getting on or off the airplane or in making a connection, let the airline know in advance what services you will require. For example, you may not need to use a wheelchair for mobility assistance, but because airports can be large and sometimes confusing places to navigate, you may need assistance in finding your way through the airport and interpreting directional signs. So a medical certificate is a written statement from the passenger's physician saying that the passenger is capable of completing the flight safely without requiring extraordinary medical care. Simply having a disability is not a reason for an airline to request a medical certificate unless the person has an incubator, is on a stretcher, needs medical oxygen during the flight, or has a medical condition which causes the airline to have reasonable doubt that the person can complete the flight safely without requiring extraordinary medical assistance. The problem with these and other ACAA rules is the language still leaves much to interpretation and the airline personnel to decide whether the person can complete the flight safely. Unfortunately, the airline has the ultimate decision in the interest of all passenger safety. If you're traveling alone and you're concerned that the airline may deny you travel without an attendant, you may want to get a letter from a licensed treatment provider documenting your ability to perform the travel-related functions, even though you may not otherwise be required to provide it. Let the airline know how it may assist you. Give as many details as you can about what you can do and can't do with respect to air travel. Be clear and thorough as to exactly what activities are difficult for you. The more information a service provider has, the better they will be able to accommodate you. But describing difficulties too broadly or vaguely may spark the airline's concern about your ability to complete the flight safely. So you want to be really clear and detailed. Airport escorts should be available. An airline may provide a qualified employee or allow an unticketed parent or assistant to help a person with a disability through security. Unticketed passengers can request a permit from the airline's check-in counter that will allow him or her to pass through security with the person they are assisting. And of course, every airline is different and every airport is different. So again, that's something you could call ahead to find out if that's going to be workable for you and your family. Security screening for people with disabilities should be the same as any other passenger, with some exceptions. So if the passenger requests a private screening, the airline must provide it in time for the passenger to board his or her flight. If an individual with a disability is able to pass through the security system without activating it, the person shall not be subject to special screening procedures. And if an individual with a disability is not able to pass through the system without activating it, the person will be subject to further screening in the same manner as any other passenger activating the system. By making sure the gate workers are aware of your presence, you can be proactive in getting help if you need it. You're always free to move about the terminal. Airline personnel cannot keep people with disabilities in terminals or require them to remain in holding areas during delays or while waiting for other transportation assistance. So often if you alert people that you may need help ahead of time. Also, the airport must have properly trained personnel available to help persons with a disability in boarding and exiting the plane. However, airlines are not permitted to hand carry passengers on and off, to directly pick up a passenger's body, but there should be people that help if boarding and exiting are an issue. So here's a quiz. Which of these items are airline personnel not required to do? Move to and from seats as part of the boarding and exiting process, open packages and identify food, provide assistance with eating, Use an onboard wheelchair when available to enable passengers to move to and from the lavatory. To move to and from the lavatory, as long as it doesn't require lifting or carrying by the airline employee. To load and retrieve carry-on items, including mobility aids and other assistive devices stowed on board the aircraft. And assistance with actual eating is not required by airline personnel. And just a side note, airline personnel are not required to provide assistance with elimination functions or to perform medical services. So admitting that you have difficulty with one or more of these tasks does not allow the airline to deny you travel. So the tasks that are required to fly, they cannot deny you travel. And the airline must be able to tell you how the safety of all passengers would be affected by your presence on the flight. Unfortunately, the airline does not have to give you that response until after your day of travel. So, if an airline refuses to allow you to travel on your originally scheduled flight for reasons relating to your disability, the airline must provide the written statement describing the reason within 10 calendar days of the flight. This even applies if the carrier denied transportation on that flight for safety-related reasons. If you feel the airline is not following the law and discussing the problem with the airline personnel has not resolved the issue, there are steps that you can take. One thing, a quick note, is the airline may not limit the number of persons with disabilities on a flight. So if you're on a group outing, they cannot say how large or small the number of people can be in your group. And also, airlines may not keep anyone out of a specific seat on the basis of their disability. So airlines may not keep anyone out of the specific seat or require anyone to sit in a particular seat on the basis of disability, except to comply with the FAA or foreign government safety requirements, like when you have to perform certain duties in the special seats. Also, assistive devices do not count against any limit on the number of pieces of carry-on baggage. So collapsible wheelchairs or other assistive devices, they have priority in cabin storage space, including the closets, over other passengers' items brought on board at the same flight. Also, if the passenger with a disability chooses to pre-board, they do get to choose their overhead storage for their carry-on assistive devices. So back to having a complaint. All airlines are required to have a complaints resolution official, the CRO, and they must be immediately available, even if by phone, to resolve disagreements. So a CRO is the airline's expert on disability accommodation issues. Airlines are required to make one available to you at no cost, in person, at the airport, or by phone during the times they're operating. You are entitled to talk with a CRO who has the authority to resolve complaints on behalf of the airline if you feel they're not following the ACAA rules. Discussing the situation with the CRO is the best way to resolve issues, and ultimately, the pilot has the final say when it comes to issues of passenger safety. Asking the CRO to confirm his or her decision with the pilot can add another layer of protection for you. Another choice available to you is to contact the Department of Transportation. So if you're still not satisfied with the airline's response, you may contact the Department of Transportation's Consumer Protection Hotline, 800-778-4838, and lodge the complaint with them. So to wrap up, the most important thing is to know your rights before you fly and to keep your cool. Make sure you plan ahead and allow plenty of time for accommodations to be made, which will help make your flying experience more enjoyable. To summarize, prepare. Talk with your child, do social stories, make visual schedules, do an airport dress rehearsal. And for packing, do your checklists. Make sure you have all your necessary documents. The clothes that you've packed based on your visual schedules. Don't forget your magic suitcase of in-flight distractions. Know your rights and what the airline personnel can assist you with, and enjoy your travels.